what we have to accept is what President Kennedy said in 1963. This is their war. We can help them, we can't win it for them.
I shall not seek, and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president.
Don't you know that you can blast me out?
The time has come for us to leave the valley of despair and climb the mountain so that we may see the glory of the dawn, a new day for America and a new dawn for peace and freedom in the world.
The year 1967 represented a cultural shift in music that would continue far past its 365 days. Turning the page onto a new year, 1968 was different. Multiple musicians that ruled the Summer of Love still found popular success throughout the coming year. Artists like the Beatles, The Doors, Jimi Hendrix, Big Brother and the Holding Company, and the Rolling Stones all remained in the mainstream, yet each allowed for change that was necessary. Although rock and roll has an earlier origin than the 1960s, this decade is when rock really found its footing as mainstream music. Elvis Presley had dominated the 1950s with his swinging hips and crooning vocals, but bubblegum pop and jazz music still had plenty of chart success. Elvis had the final #1 song of 1960 with Are You Lonesome Tonight?
Are you lonesome tonight? Do you miss me tonight?
In comparison, the Rolling Stones had one of the last #1 songs of 1969 with Honky Tonk Woman. There's definitely a difference between the two. A lot had changed in the span of 10 years. The youth movement had a tremendous impact on culture around the world, which in turn led them to be more rebellious. Casual sex was welcomed with the introduction of the birth control pill. Smoking marijuana and taking drugs like LSD were so widespread that 1967 has become synonymous with the Summer of Love. The world had shifted from the colourless 50s to the kaleidoscopic 60s. This also represented the music that was coming out of small towns across America and across the pond in England. In 1968, The Who began working on an album centered around a deaf, dumb, and blind kid named Tommy. One of the most famous supergroups ever created came together with Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Motown had started to explore deeper material, like those in I Heard It Through the Grapevine by Marvin Gaye and Love Child by the Supremes. After tragic deaths from several of America's progressive leaders, Dion DiMucci decided to create Abraham, Martin, and John. This was a nod to the heroes that were heartbreakingly assassinated while trying to do good. Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King Jr., and John F. Kennedy, the shout out to Robert F. Kennedy as well, will go down in history for not only their deaths, but for the good they did in their relatively short lifespans.
Did you see my old friend Bobby? Can you tell me where he's gone? You know I thought I saw him walking up over the hill with Abraham and Martin and John.
Notable albums that define the unique year of 1968 include Waiting for the Sun, Astral Weeks, Beggar's Banquet, Electric Ladyland, Wheels of Fire, Bookends, Cheap Thrills, and music from Big Pink, and a lot more. But most of all, it was the year the Beatles found themselves musically.
Hey Jude, don't make it bad.
Fab Four went from their most psychedelic and bizarre album to traveling to India to find peace and tranquility. This gave way to the Beatles, a double album that was easily their most versatile. Each member's distinct personality is apparent throughout the momentous track list. The Beatles, more commonly known as the White Album, is truly a timeless classic that is painfully underappreciated for what it brings musically compared to others from the Beatles' catalog. The journey it takes you on feels like each song is its own piece to the puzzle. The Beatles knew what they were doing when creating this album, whether it was separate or together. This complex, wonderful, imperfect group of chaos is what was needed next from them. This album is what made the Beatles seem human. After the critical success they received on Revolver and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, it was only time to see that this well-oiled machine does have its flaws. Throughout 1968, it was hard not to find some piece of music for everyone. With several iconic albums released that year, they are all so classically 1968. Shifting from hippie culture to a more socially conscious world, this is what truly introduced us to protest music, double albums, and of course, to the beginnings of what we've all grown to know as classic rock.
And I think the fact that it's got so much on it is one of the things that's cool about it.